Welcome back, guys. So this is where we left it off on our last video. So now what we want to do today is we want to now get this URL and then check if we do have this endpoint within our API. So now what we're going to be doing right now is we're going to have a new folder whereby we'll be having all our endpoints, right? So we're just going to separate that and then we'll say routes. We can say endpoints, right? Let's say endpoints, but then convention is routes. So let's just say routes. For me, convention is just routes. So say routes. So now don't worry about this logo. This is because of material UI. So now what I want to do is I want to make a class of all my routes. So I'll say routes. Alright. So in this class, what we're gonna be doing right now is just a dummy route, so that we can make sure that everything is running smooth, right? So here we're gonna have that, and then this route will take in data in the callback, right? So now what then we do from this is, for now, let's just call back 200 and then have a message saying server is up and running, right? So this is the first route that we want, and this route, let's have a note for ourselves that the endpoint this should be /ping, right? Now this should be the endpoint for this route. However, let's have another endpoint, and this is the 404 endpoint, and this is not, this will be when none of our routes are found, right? So then we can say 404, right? Now what we then do is we then say not found. So this route will also take in data, call back, but then what we then do is we then call back 404, right? And then there's no need to, we can add a payload. We can say message, we can say error, endpoint not found, right? So this is what will be returning back to the user, 404 for not found. So say module.export, want to export that route. So now we come back to our server. Now we need to require that class. So we say const route is equal to require. We want to require route, right? So now what we want to do is down here, let's just make an object for path. So this one will be /ping, and in the /ping, now we need to instantiate our class instance. So say route is equal to new route, right? So in the /ping, I want to make use of the route dot ping, right? So when a user hits this path, then I want to have this function get executed. So how we get that done is we come just right here. So what we do is then say const, we say requested path is equal to. So now what we want to do is we want to say path dot requested underscore path, does it exist? So this is like the ternary operation. So is this, so if, so basically we're saying if this, and then we want to make use of that function, that is the requested path. Else if that does not exist, what we want to do is we want to say route dot not found. I hope this makes sense. So what we did here is we say if this route exists within our object, we want to make use of that route, and it will be giving back to us the function. Else we fall back to the not found, right? So now what we then do is we come here to the request on end. Why we come here is because now all the payload here would have been passed by our string decoder. So now we can take this one out, and then what we then do is we then say requested path, because now requested path is a function now, because it's either it used this one or it used that function. So when I say requested path, and that requested path will take in data and a callback, but then in this callback it will take in status code and also payload, right? So this will be the callback. Remember how we did it? It's the data and the callback. So but then in our callback we want the status code and the payload, right? So now what we do is we want to have this data, right? Because remember we want to pass down the data that exists, not because right now we're basically using this function, and this function is expecting the data that exists. So now what we then do is we come just right on top of it, and the data is basically the information that we have here. That is the data that we want. So now we say const, and then we say data, and then we'll be using the shorthand what we call the shorthand ES6. So this will be requested path, should be that, and then we say request method, and then we say query strings, and then we say request header, and that should be all, because we even have the method, and that should be all, and also the buffer. So we're gonna say the buffer is the payload, and then we put in buffer, right? So now that would be our object in a whole, or the data. So now what we want to do is we want to validate this status code. If the status code is a number, so we say const status. If the status is the type of status code is equal to a number, and then I want to use that status code, else I want to say 404, and then we do the same thing for the payload, but then now we want an object in terms of like the payload. We say if the payload is equal to an object, and then I want to use that payload, else I want to use an empty object. And then what I then do finally is I respond back with, so we say response dot end, and then we end with the payload. Let's just send back the payload. We say json dot stringify, and then we pass down the payload to the user, right? And then before we do a lot, we'll then even send back JSON data, right? But then let's just make sure that this works. So now what we then do is we then say let's start out our server. So we say node server.js, and then we're getting this error, payload already exists, right? So now it's fine. Let's just make this a capital letter D, make that a capital letter D, right? And there we go. So now this was yesterday's, so now we want to go for the ping. We say ping, come on man, we say ping, and in this ping we just want to send out, so we don't have a payload, so we expect to see message server is up and running. So this is what we were sending back from the ping, right? And then what we then also want to do is, let's say ping, right? That so we expect to get the error endpoint not found, because this doesn't exist within our endpoint. Make sense? How that makes sense? So now what we want to do is we also want to handle this thing to send back JSON data. So this will be the last part of this video. So before we end the response, we want to say response.set header, and here in the set header I want to say content type. So the content type here is application. Come on. So content type is application slash JSON. So now we're getting our API set for sending back JSON data, right? So now we go back here, and then we send that, and then we're sending back JSON data from our from our API. So now this should be it for this video. So just to recap, what we did is we now made a new class that handles our routes or our endpoints. So now we just did a ping endpoint and we did a not found endpoint. So now from there, what we did is we required that class, and then we made a path, right? So this path will help us to identify which path the user wanted, and then we use the endpoints for each and every path. And then finally we found that using ternary operation, and then we called that function, and then we made sure that we return JSON data content type application slash JSON. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and hoping to see you guys on the next video. If you guys are liking this video, it's nice, short and sweet, hit the like button, subscribe so that you guys can get notified. Also hit that notification bell, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Goodbye.